Thank you, as always. Got a big class here. I like it. Love speaking at Utah State. This is probably, I don't know, my 30th or 35th time I've spoken in class like this. And so excited to talk more about my story instead of recruiting, which has actually been one of the big reasons I've been up talking about BREX. Out of curiosity, who has heard of BREX before? The company I work for. Not one person has heard about BREX. Oh, where was that right here? All right. Do you know what we do, anything about BREX? Close. Yeah, but it's in the right industry. So financial technology. How many have heard of technology companies before? Obviously, everyone knows Facebook, Amazon, Google, all those large companies. Financial technology, right? A whole nother realm of tech to work in, right? So when a lot of people think about going and starting their careers at specific companies, you're mainly probably thinking, I want to go work at Goldman Sachs. I want to go work on Wall Street. I want to go and do financial analytics at a specific company. But fintech is this new industry that really back in 2016, 2017, it really started getting a really good start of people wanting to work there. So one of the most prominent fintechs that you guys all know is probably Venmo, right? Venmo changed the game when it came to how you pass money back and forth. How many of you have Venmo on your phone? Every single person in here. Who doesn't have Venmo? So let's take Venmo here, for example, right? So before Venmo, what did you have to do in order to split a payment or pay your friend? Cash, right? Like cash was the only option. There was like not really a bank transfer, and there's like Zelle today between banks, but like probably none of you really use Zelle. So Venmo like really came out and innovated the space of combining finance with technology. And that's where I really want to focus on today is how I ultimately decided to go into fintech and then also focus my career on the sales aspect of this. So I can kind of like get a gauge of this. How many of you in here would consider yourselves very good at sales or communications? Come on, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Few people, not many. All right. How many of you would consider yourselves very good with numbers and finance? Okay, there we go. That's what I like to see. This is like the perfect type of class to talk to. So let's go through my career to start off here so you can kind of hear how I kicked everything off. But before we do that, I have one question. I actually brought some swag that I'll pass out for whoever can get this right. Who has heard of Buckminster Fuller before? Anyone? He defined and had a definition for what wealth is. Who said here? What did he say without looking this up? What is the definition of wealth? No, and I hear a few people typing. Any guesses? What is wealth? Yeah. Your total accumulated asset. Okay. Net worth. Really, really close. All right, and there's no wrong answer here, by the way. Anyone else? Yeah. Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm going to share this, and hopefully this is something that will get instilled into your mind forever. So he said, the definition of wealth is a person's ability to survive X number of days forward. So the way that I look at this, and I first heard this quote from one of my mentors when I was in college, and he talked about this idea of the average American will work until they're 65 to 70 years old, and they will retire with less than $5,000 in their bank account, right? Which is crazy. All of you are going into finance, and hopefully that isn't going to be your situation, right? When you graduate, or not graduate, when you retire and have $5,000 in your bank account. So if you stopped working today, I kind of changed this a little bit. How long could you live based off of the income that you have coming in? And over your career, right, in college, this might only be like 2 months or 3 months. You might be in the negative right now because you have student loans and you couldn't even survive a day if you stopped working today, right? But as you get into your career, these are the types of things that you need to think about in your personal life. And this is where I am very, very passionate, and why I decided to go into fintech, right? Financial technology is not only did I want to work in finance, but I wanted to understand how I could get ahead for myself so that financially I was very stable for my entire life. So one of my mentors in college said, if you are financially savvy enough, in 10 years, you could be wealthy, right? Does wealthy mean being rich? No. So who can tell me, like, what would be the difference there between rich and wealthy? Yeah. Yep. So for wealth, right? So that's kind of like living within your means, but you can basically live forever, right? If you think of someone that's rich, what's like the definition of someone that's rich? They got money to burn, they got boats, they got big homes, right? They have everything they need from that perspective, right? But rich people, right? There's typically this stigmatism, right? This idea that the more you buy, right, the more liabilities you have, which also means that you have more monthly expenses. So if you were to stop working, you might only be able to survive for a year or 2 years before you actually ran out of money. So being financially wealthy doesn't mean being rich. It means accumulating assets, accumulating forms of passive income, so you could stop working and actually continue to live the same life that you're living, right? So this has been a goal of mine since, it's been now, let's see, 2015, so 2022 now. So in 3 more years is my goal, that I wanted to be completely financially wealthy, that I could step away from any job if I wanted to and never have to work again, right? How do I get all these ideas, right? How do I actually implement this into my life? Hopefully you can kind of help to pick up on a few things I talked about today on how I combined my finance and economics degree at Utah State with my pursuit of trying to be financially wealthy over a course of 10 years. So my story. So this is basically, I wrote down every job that I ever had, right? So let's go through this really quick. In 2008, 2011, this was my years in high school. So I graduated high school in 2011. I basically mowed lawns, shoveled snow, did the little things that probably every single one of you did to try to earn a few extra bucks growing up. I came from your very average family. I would say I grew up here in Logan. My dad worked at Thicol his whole career. My mom was a nurse her whole career. In 2011, right after high school, I worked at a call center, got a job at a movie theater, worked at Macy's grocery store here in Logan, and was donating plasma, right? Like trying to do everything a college student does to make a few extra bucks while also going to college full time. In 2012, served an LDS mission, right? Kind of like put how much I was making over here on the side. Came home from my mission in 2014, and I worked at a FBA e-commerce company, so fulfilled by Amazon. For those of you that don't know what that is, this is how Amazon's able to fulfill all of your 2-day orders so quickly. Very, very good model. And then I was talking with some people about this whole idea of summer sales, right? Has anyone in here done summer sales? Based off okay, perfect, there we go. Got a salesperson in here. So sales for me, this is when I like really realized that I had something that it felt like a lot of my other classmates didn't when it came to finance, right? Being able to negotiate, communicate with individuals within the classroom, but also like on the doors, that type of communication is very, very important. And for every one of you in here, even if you don't feel like you're good at communications or sales right now, I highly encourage you to take a class that will help you get better there. Because as you're in your career, if you go in and you're going to be working just on numbers, right, or like on a finance team, you have to be able to communicate with your manager and other people in the company so you can show what your value is to continue to work your way up in that company, right? You need to be able to show how you're differentiated from all of your other classmates. And so this is one of those areas that I said to myself, I was getting close to, perfect A grades in all my finance classes. But when I looked around, I was not the smartest person in the room, right? I worked harder than anyone else, but I was not the smartest person in the room. And so I knew that actually like getting a finance job at one of these companies on Wall Street or one of those areas wasn't going to be the right fit for me. So going back to this really quick, 2015, on day one of deciding to go out and do summer sales, I got a $3,000 sign-on bonus. I referred 5 friends that came out with me, and then I made $30,000 over the summer. So I made more in that summer than I had in like the last 8 years combined. And I was like, I'm onto something here. This actually could really propel my life and my career if I can figure out how to make these lump sums of money, but then also not blow that money. So right away, a lot of my friends that I actually did summer sales with, they came home. And what's the first thing that you see a lot of these summer sales guys buying? New car, new Tesla. They're driving around, right? When you think about rich versus wealthy, the people buying the Tesla, where do they think they are? They think they're rich, right? They have this big lump sum of money. But for me, I had this idea of I want to be wealthy, right? So how do I build wealth now using this money? So I actually have more slides to go through on this, but with this money, actually it's significant less the amount of money than this, I purchased my first home, right? So in 2015 in college, I purchased my first home. How many of you are homeowners in here? How many of you would ever imagine owning a home in college? All right, there we go. A few people. Everyone thinks it's very difficult to buy a home. It's really very easy to buy a home. And that was one of the very first principles I learned from one of my mentors, is how easy that actually is. And then immediately I was able to lock in this long-term asset that hopefully would appreciate over time. All right, so who can tell me what appreciation is from all your finance classes? Exactly. Yep. So I'll write this down. This home I purchased for, oh, let me grab a different one. $114,900. Now I know that's crazy now in Logan and where things are, but right in 2015, that was like the most expensive townhome in Logan. Right, like that was crazy. So November 2015 was able to secure my first property. So after that, right, I came back. I felt very confident. So I went back out, did another summer of summer sales. So this is between my junior and senior year. That summer ended up making $58,000 all in. So now I'm feeling pumped, right? And I'm like, where should I put my money so I can continue to grow and build this passive income to become wealthy, right? I'm 1 year in at this point. I have a goal of being able to fully retire in 10 years if that's what I want to do, right? You can see that my job was funding what my passion is. I hope that you guys can see that today. Like, my passion is being able to be financially savvy and be the smartest person in the room when it comes to passive income, when it comes to these types of investments. And I think that what you do in your career will make a direct correlation. There'll be a direct correlation, a direct impact in how you think about those two things. And so going forward here, I'm about to graduate. I'm about 6 months before or so from doing that. For those of you that know Sterling Bone, he started a sales program here at Utah State. That first semester of him starting that, I went to him and said, I want to be a part of this. I want to grow it with you, right? So I was the first president of Pro Sales for the club, if you guys have heard of that. It's now a class here at Utah State of about 75 students. And that helped me to ultimately network like crazy. And so those next 6 months before graduation, I had a goal of I wanted to get 10 job offers from companies. Right? How many of you are seniors in here? One. How many juniors? Okay. And sophomore, freshman? Okay, a lot of sophomore, freshmen. Okay, this is perfect then. For everyone in here, it is so important that you go to the networking events that the Huntsman School has here. How many of you look at Fridays as a free day? Probably a lot of you, right? If you're coming to school and not taking advantage of Focus Friday, you are really missing out on what Huntsman School has to offer. It's through those Friday events that I was able to network, go and job shadow individuals, and ultimately actually learn that I did not want to go and work on Wall Street and be an investment banker. That sounded like the worst job on earth, right? For those that do it, awesome. Like it works for some people. A lot of people that I work with at my current company did that route. They went and they did investment banking for a number of years. They now work in finance. I'm not saying that's a bad route to go, but I very quickly was able to see that wasn't the route I wanted to take. So by networking with all these individuals, I started to learn about these financial technology companies that were coming out. So a very big accounting platform called NetSuite was one of the first ones that I got very passionate about. So NetSuite they were acquired by Oracle, but they are one of the largest and best accounting platforms once a company gets to a certain size. They're actually one of BREX's biggest partners now, funny enough. And I was a few days away from signing with them, going to work in Denver. I was going to be on their sales team selling a financial product, right? Which I understood and did very well in all of my finance classes at Utah State. But I knew when it actually came down to the numbers, that wasn't my passion. My passion was selling whatever the product was at that company. And so a few days away from signing at NetSuite, I met and heard about this company called SoFi. Have any of you heard about SoFi before? All right, football fans in here definitely know SoFi Stadium, $5 billion stadium. They don't own that, they're the sponsor of it, right? But what did SoFi do, or what do they do right now? Does anyone know what SoFi does? Yeah.
They just took like banking that was kind of super old fashioned and made it like all digital and updated and new.
Exactly, perfect way to say it. So, and they launched in 2011. 4 Stanford graduates said, hey, all of us are graduating from Stanford. We all have student loans. The average interest rate on these student loans is 8%, but the average default rate is 0% from people that get an MBA from Stanford. So they went to investors and said, hey, if we refinanced a bunch of these student loans and kind of like combined them, almost like a mortgage security, right? Would you buy these loans at 5%? And they're like, absolutely, we'll take 5% from these people all day. Right? The average graduate at the time was making $250,000 a year from Stanford. And so that's how SoFi started, was reimagining the way that student loans were done. And then they launched a banking product, personal loans, wealth management, investing to compete with Robinhood and Fidelity and those other accounts, right? Car loans, health insurance, right? Everything that you would need as a consumer is what SoFi ultimately built. And I immediately knew that's where my passions were, right? It aligned with my why on my individual side of why am I ultimately wanting to go into finance? Why do I like this space? It's because I care a lot about personal finance, and that's what propels me to ultimately move forward. So I started at SoFi on the, oh, that's going dark at all. Okay. Started at SoFi on one of their sales teams there, and I was a mortgage broker, right? Working with high net worth individuals in mostly the Bay Area and working on home loans between $1 and $3 million, right? This is when my eyes, perfect, thank you. Where my eyes like really got opened. My starting salary out of college was $25,000 plus commission, right? With NetSuite, it was going to be $75,000 plus commission. So I took a lesser pay because I believed so much in the product. I knew that I would crush whatever my on-target earnings would be. So my first year, I made 110. Right. So like out of college, making 110. At the time, that was amazing. Nowadays, I'm not sure if 100 even sounds good to all of you guys or not, but made 110. I was on track my second year of making about 160, but in so doing this, I did just under 150 loans over my whole time at SoFi. And guess what one thing was that I was super passionate about on my personal side of things? Real estate. And so being able to see all of these loans and process loans got me all of the expertise I needed to understand how I could purchase a lot of homes very quickly. And so that's where like really on the personal side for me, that's where things really took off. And so the 2 things I wanted to talk about today are scaling your career and scaling your life, right? Because scaling my life is ultimately is what I'm most passionate about, right? Going back to that wealth, being wealthy, right? Like that's what I'm ultimately working towards. So anyway, 2018 comes around. I was one of 35 mortgage brokers at SoFi. We worked with people all around the country. And my CRO at SoFi left. what seemed like was, the straight path upwards. I'm sure you've seen graphs of, early stage companies growing and their revenue upwards to the right as quickly as possible. And SoFi was on that path, and our CRO stepped away to go basically found a company. And I was super confused by it. And then my director left. And then my manager left. And then someone I worked very closely with on my business development team left. And I'm like, where are all these guys going? Right. So I did my research. I reached out, and they were all at this brand new, tiny little startup called BREX, right? Which was, going back to what does BREX do? We were the first corporate credit card for startups, right? Sounds kind of like a crazy thing to focus on. It's not that sexy, right? When you think about SoFi, reimagining banking for individuals is like a very sexy thing. You can get someone nice credit cards, nice debit card. You can make really cool features. Everyone's kind of talking about it with their friends. Like, corporate credit cards was such an interesting space, and no one had even thought of reimagining that because American Express has owned that space for so long. So I saw some of the best people at SoFi go to this small little startup. And so I knew I had to get there. And so as quickly as possible, I left SoFi, went to BREX, and was employee number 18 at BREX. So to kind of fast forward a little bit here, you're the only one that knows about it. Who wants to take a guess what BREX is currently valued at today? 12.3 billion. When you think about Instagram, everyone has Instagram on their phones, right? How long did it take Instagram to become a $1 billion company? Less, a little bit. Or close, 2 years. It took them just over 2 years to get there. It took BREX 18 months to become a $1 billion company and ultimately continue to scale. We found this product market fit of combining finances with the right technology, right? So we were doing no personal guarantees, high credit limits, amazing technology, and great rewards. 4 simple products, only features that we were bringing to the market for companies, right? And so I was very passionate about this, right? Once again, it was helping founders, individuals, to grow their businesses, which I was very passionate about, and ultimately helped me to understand more about how I could do more in my own career, right? All right, I'm not going to talk about any of the pay at BREX, but let me go things here. By the way, is it better to do any Q&A in the middle or just kind of go? And all right, why don't we stop here for a second, and I can help answer any questions based off where we're at right now. And yes, I will get back to the 114,900 here in a little bit. Any questions? All right, yeah.
How did BREX differ from American Express when they were like trying to compete in that?
Yeah. So when you think about Venmo, right? Venmo got so popular because the only way to exchange cash was with cash, actual dollars, right? And that was very difficult. And so being able to send $12.53 to split a meal became easy. And so then that's how they differentiated, right? But like, it doesn't replace cash. It was added in addition to. When you think about American Express or even the big banks, underwriting a startup is very difficult. And one of the routes that a lot of you might go is know your customer KYC or underwriting for a bank or a fintech company. That's a very good route to go. I work very closely with those teams, and they're a very important aspect of what you would do at the company. And we figured out a way that we could underwrite these small startups without it being risky, that no bank or American Express would even touch. And so a lot of these startups early on, they had to use debit cards, or they had to personally guarantee the card, which meant that they put their personal social security number up on the line in order to get a $20,000, $25,000 credit limit for their business. So we were able to completely separate out how that worked. Yeah, really good question. Yeah.
What's a way that you might gain better sales skills and not through some sales?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, summer sales not for everybody. It's not a super fun job, right? So I mean, they have the sales program here. Honestly, like, just being a part of pro sales will help you a lot to understand how you can get uncomfortable. And like, if there's one thing I learned on my mission, kind of going back there, I don't know how many of you serve missions, but it's like, how do you get as uncomfortable as possible in a situation and turn it into a good situation? Right. And so that's how sales is as well. It's being able to step up into someone's office right here, understand a little bit about them, and walk away with them being like, I loved that conversation. And the faster you can understand and do that, the better. So I highly recommend taking pro sales or being a part of a sales class like that and doing role plays. Nobody likes to do role plays, but it will help you, I promise. Right? Even if you role played doing an interview and answering hard questions, you should do that before every interview. And that will help you in your career because you're going to land a better job. Right? You have to be able to sell yourself. They have communications classes here at Utah State. They have sales classes online you can take. You can get a mentor, someone like myself or other people that are in sales that can help walk you through and talk you through, this is how you should address certain situations. So that's what I would recommend. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So it's like about recent events, like with the cost of borrowing increasing, how different is your job now than it was like 4 years ago? Like, especially like, in 2022.
Yeah. So with BREX in specific, because we are a 30-day charge card, it's a very different reason to borrow money. So here's a typical example of a company that we are onboarding at BREX. They just raised money from a VC, we'll say $1 million. So they have $1 million in their bank account. How are you going to spend that money? Well, some of it will be ACH and wire payments, maybe for rent in an office. Maybe you have utilities, you might have payroll expenses and a few other things that you can't put on a credit card. But then every other expense, if you have a few employees, has to be spent using some system, right? We talked about Venmo being a way of transferring money as a system. So BREX is that system where you're able to actually spend the money that's in your bank account. So this actually has had zero impact on our business per se. However, VCs have stopped investing in as many companies as they were the last 4 years because they can get higher returns now in other places than just doing venture capital. Money has been literally free the last few years, right? And so it's been very, very easy across the board to get money for mortgages, personal loans, venture capital funds, crypto, for any of you that got into the crypto game, right? Like that's why it was blown up so much. But yeah, so ultimately that hasn't affected us outside of the fact that our main total addressable market has gone down a little bit because VCs are stepping back. Yeah, good question.
What's your average day in terms of on the sales side? Like how many touch points in terms of numbers or finance, or kind of speak to a little bit of your average day and kind of that interaction of the two?
Cool. Absolutely. So I'm the director of channel sales and venture-backed startups at BREX. So what does that mean? I run our partnerships team now, and I run our direct sales team at BREX. So both of these aspects, sorry.
How many on each team?
Yeah, so channel sales partners, we have 8 people on there. And then our sales team, we have about 25 people. So between the both of those, on a daily basis now, like my job ultimately, and I've seen this over the years, and I can I'll walk through my path at BREX because I think that'll also be helpful. But my job is retaining talent, hiring top talent, and producing. And so as a manager, like as an individual contributor, when you go start at a company, you should definitely make sure that you're going to like working for the person you're going to work for. Because if you're not passionate at your work and you're miserable, it's not going to be a fun job to be at. It's like highly recommend that as well while you're interviewing. Make sure you're going to like the person you're actually working for. But my day-to-day job right now, I'm probably spending about half my day on either coaching, one-on-ones, or cross-functional work, where I am working with our underwriting team, our KYC team, our fraud team, our collections team to figure out specific issues and ways that we can continue to bring in more revenue for the company, right? Like I am a revenue driving manager or director. And then the other half of my day is very focused on acquisition, where I'm hopping on sales calls with reps, or I am hopping on partnerships calls so that we can close those specific deals and continue to push the company forward that way. When it comes to KYC and underwriting, I think actually, I'll say a few of you will definitely work in this space. When you go and work for any bank, you have to be able to analyze, is this company going to make us money or lose us money, right? And there's going to be sales reps that are pushing back saying they're going to make us a lot of money. And you're going to say, no, they're going to lose us a lot of money because there's all of these risks, right? And there is this interception of what sales is trying to bring in and what finance is trying to push back on and say, we believe that this company, based off of our models, will be fraudulent, or that this company is not going to be a good company to onboard. And so I work very closely with those teams, and I'd be working, closely with someone like yourself that would say, all right, this company, we found looking at their credit report that they actually have $100,000 of unpaid dues. They haven't paid their taxes last year, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then I would come and say, okay, like that makes sense. I don't, then I definitely agree. I don't think we should do anything with that company. However, there might be a deal that comes across where you say, this is why I don't like this company. And I would come and say, right, okay, how about we do this? Instead of giving them a $100,000 credit limit, we give them a $40,000 credit limit on biweekly payments. Lowers our risk. They have the cash balance to prove that we're actually good there. And then you're able to onboard that company. And so that's how I work very closely actually with finance teams at BREX that are on our KYC and underwriting team. And then one of the most difficult things at any company is budget planning, right? And so I have to meet with my finance team every quarter to budget for my entire team what we're going to spend. And so I'm working directly with everyone that's actually running the spreadsheets. I was never that good with Excel, right? Are any of you just absolute whizzes with Excel? If you are, then you're going to crush it in finance, right? Like I was never good at that, and I knew that. And that's why I didn't want to go into that side of finance. But if you are good there, then like building budgets and understanding how those budgets work and then working with teams cross-functionally is going to be so important. And being able to communicate with sales teams and accounting teams, finance, everyone across the company will be very important there. So I do that once a quarter as well, working very closely. And my background in finance has helped me to understand how I can not only go in and get approval almost every single time, because I know the basics of Excel. So I know how to run all of my team's numbers and say, this is what we need in order to get everything approved. And then the finance team says, you're good to go. Right. And so like, that's how that kind of intersects there. If I didn't have a finance background, it'd be difficult for me if I was only a salesperson to go and say, hey team, does this work for what you're looking for? And they say like, this is unorganized. You don't know how to work Excel. You need to like work with someone on our finance team to actually build out your models. So it's a very good question. Glad you brought that up. We'll go into these three things, and then I would love to talk about my history. What time is it? We have until 3, is that right? 2:30. Okay, perfect. So Q&A will leave 15 minutes or so. So another 8 minutes.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, we're 2:30 to 45, but yes, somewhere in there.
2:30. Okay, 2:30 to 45. Okay, perfect. Okay, so these. Oh yeah, if you can help that. 3 things to write down. This is what I would highly recommend. This is regardless of how your mind thinks, right? Like I'm not an Excel person. If you are, these 3 things still apply. 1, what is your superpower? Right? I realized very quickly, I love to speak. I love these types of events. I love sales. I love communications, love working cross-functionally. So very quickly, I knew like, what am I going to be unbelievably good at that is differentiated from the rest of my peers? Good example of this, when I was in college, right? You have to do group projects still, I'm guessing, right? You're going to work in groups when you actually work for a company very often. And so I realized I was very good at actually bringing groups together and delegating and working with everyone in that group and making sure that each person that I worked with was working well with everyone else. And so like I saw those types of leadership abilities within myself early on in college, at SoFi, early on at BREX. And I was able to pitch that to my managers, directors, and VPs to ultimately get me to where I'm at today. So what is your superpower? Understand what that is and attack it. That's where you need to focus. 2, what is your why? This is such an interesting question, right? But like, why are you wanting to work where you want to work? Are you wanting to go to New York to work on Wall Street because you watched a movie and it looked like pretty cool? Are you wanting to go there because everyone else says like, I want to go be an investment banker, right? Or you wanting to go there because you like done your actual research, you've job shadowed somebody, right? Understanding your why of where you want to get to and why you want to get there will be very important. 3, you create your own luck. It's very easy for me in the moment to say like, oh my gosh, I got so lucky by doing this, but I had to create all of my own luck. Of the 35 people that were all on that same team at SoFi, guess how many of them came over to BREX? I was the only one. And why? Lots of other people tried and they didn't get hired, right? They didn't network with other people in the company like I did. They didn't perform at a level like I did. They didn't come in early and stay late like I did, right? So you have to create your own luck and be that type of individual. And that's how you fast track your career, right? Most people don't get to the level that they think they're going to get to in the amount of time that it takes. Let's see, that's a hard thing to say there. The amount of time it'll take you to become a manager or director or VP, whatever that might be, it's hard to do that without putting in the time and effort. And I always tell people, I would rather work 60 hours a week for 20 years than 40 hours a week for 40 years. Okay. I am a big component of driving that. So any questions about any of these 3 things? Cool. Definitely focus on this. Let me see. Okay. I want to talk about my path at BREX. And then as a side note, I can always go over some real estate stuff because that's where I'm really passionate, but that might be for another class. So we'll see there, Ryan. But so when I came over to BREX, I actually took a pay cut to come over. I loved the vision, the company, and it was a startup. Right? Being able to work at a startup for me, especially early on in my career, was always something that I dreamed of doing. And it was also very risky, right? So the risks of a startup are that it will completely fail. So I moved to San Francisco. We had just found out my wife was pregnant. She told me when we got married that she had one stipulation. We had to be in Utah when baby was born, and I did not honor that. We moved to San Francisco anyway. After 6 months of working there and grinding, I was in the office wearing multiple hats. I was doing customer support. I was doing relationship management. I was doing sales. I was focusing on partnerships. Anything the company asked me to do, I was doing. And so be very willing to do that no matter what company you go to. And if you go to a more established company, you are going to basically plug in to a specific role. And if that's the type of job you want, awesome. That type of job was not for me. And I saw that pretty quickly when I was at SoFi. It was a little more established by the time I got there. And so my career growth projection was not going to be what I wanted it to be. And so going to a startup, you get to create your own luck. You get to create the roles that you want. So I was an individual contributor called an IC, which is generally just you're not managing anybody. After about 6 months, my manager came to me and said, we want to promote you to go and do enterprise sales at BREX. We think you're ready to be like the top guy here. And I immediately said, no, I actually think that there's a lot of room to grow in this specific part of BREX. And it was working with startups with less than 50 employees and only focusing on that market. So instead he said, okay, why don't you go ahead and put together a brief, right? A document on what you want to do. And if we like it, then we'll let you do that. So I did that. I put it all together. I presented it to my VP and the founders, and they accepted. So I brought my role to them. I created my next role. And that was to be a manager, build a team of 4 to start, and grow and scale the specific part of BREX. From there, I grew that team to 12. And then I got promoted to continue to run our mid-market as well as that SMB sales team. I did that for about 2 years, and it's really just training, building, hiring, motivating, being enthusiastic, working cross-functionally with the finance teams, accounting teams, being very well liked within the company so that you can get things done and ultimately drive the business forward, right? And by focusing on this, I then got moved over to, let's see, this was after, so I did about 6 months as an IC, year as a manager, another year as a senior sales manager running mid-market and SMB sales. And then I came over and they asked me to run all of our partnerships team and now grow and scale that out. And I've been doing that now for about 15 or 16 months, which adds up to about 4.5 years at BREX now. And ultimately, like I look back and I got lucky I was able to get into management after 6 months, but I had to create that role. And that path, I was able to work closely with people on the finance teams, and I was able to be well liked so that, when I hired a team out, I was able to train them on the right ways to work with other teams cross-functionally so that they could also progress in their career and work and succeed. Okay. So that's kind of my path at BREX, going from an IC to now a director and running a fairly large team, and how I kind of plan to continue to scale and grow my teams from there. So, all right, that's a lot of talking. 2:15. You said the class ends at what time? Sorry, I don't understand.
No, it's like, 2:30-ish.
2:30 is when it ends. Okay.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and pause there for a second, open up for questions, see what you guys have, and then I would love to share one example of how this piece of real estate has actually shaped my entire portfolio, which is what I'm most passionate about. Yeah.
So I assume you work a lot of online. You don't have to go into an office.
Yeah. Great question. So it's one thing I didn't talk about, so I'm glad you brought that up. So I was in San Francisco, grew and scaled there. For those of you that have been to San Francisco, it is very expensive. And so scaling teams there actually doesn't work very well. So they asked me to move back to Utah and open up our Salt Lake City office. So I opened that in September of 2019, and we scaled the team to about 120 people over the next 6 months. And then March 2020 hits, right? So COVID comes, and we as a company have to decide, what do we do? Everyone's kind of working remotely right now. After about 6 months of working remotely, we decided as a company, first company now, you can live anywhere in the country. We actually have offices in Tel Aviv, Israel, Canada, Brazil. We have a few people that work in Hawaii, and then everywhere across the states. Working globally now is well accepted at a lot of these tech companies, which is really, really cool. So, but for the most part, I'm working from my home office every single day. And then for partnerships, I travel to Austin, LA, San Francisco, Miami, and New York as my main spots. Fun little travel. Yeah.
How often are you traveling?
Yeah. So I would say 2 times per month on average. And usually it's about 3-day trips. So I'll fly out on a Tuesday, come back on a Thursday night type thing. Short, fun. And then we also sponsor most of the big events in tech. So anything about SaaStr, Sweet World, ZeroCon, a lot of these events in the fintech space. I'm usually going to almost all of those events and then leading the charge of who needs to be at the booth at what times, what are our goals, how do we achieve those goals, and making sure we communicate that to the finance teams, once again, right, that are always demanding a certain acquisition for the money that's spent. right? So being able to understand how those costs are associated helped me a lot by having a finance background. Question? Yeah.
How would you say like your schedule is now? Because I mean, you said when you're starting out, you're working, 60-hour weeks, putting in all that work and stuff. How does your schedule now and your quality of life now compare to when you first started out in the industry?
Yeah. So if you go and work for a startup, which I would highly recommend everyone in here working for a startup at some point in your life, as long as you're willing to grind, like it's a serious grind. Now it's still a grind, but it's a different type of grind. Right. And so it's a little more flexible for me now where I'm in management. I can delegate things. My daughter is 3.5 years old now. She was in soccer this last season, I guess. She had 12 games. 3-year-old soccer is very funny. So I said, I'm not going to miss any games. And so they run Tuesday nights and Saturdays, and Tuesdays they started as early as 4. So I just blocked my calendar off. Right. Speaking events like this, I block my calendar off. And that's really what it comes down to is time management. And one piece of advice I would give you as you get into your career, or even right now in college with time management, there's going to be things that give you energy, and there's going to be things that take away energy. And so you should always take a look at your calendar, which really drives your day, and say, what is a meeting that I'm going to walk away from and it's going to keep me fired up? And what is a meeting that's going to drain my energy by the end of it? And the ones that drain my energy, I try to do async, right? I message them. Usually it's the finance team because I suck to work with. No, I'm just kidding. I'll do async. I'll send them an email and say, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Here's what I've done. Does this answer what you were looking for in this meeting? And if they say yes, say great. If they say no, and say, okay, well, let's plan to sync, but instead of 30 minutes, let's do 15 minutes. Right. And so that way it doesn't drain my energy and I can focus on what's most important there. But still a grind. If you ask my wife, she'll say I work too much, but I love to work. I love what I do. It doesn't feel like I'm working. And hopefully everyone in here will get to a point like that it doesn't actually feel like you're working because you love what you do. All right. Yeah.
Do you suggest for a college student to take out a loan, let's say buy a property if they don't have that much money, they'll get some starting capital?
Is your question, should you take a loan out to buy property? It's a difficult question. You can't do that in a way that they'll let you use those funds. Like if you went and got a personal loan, it wouldn't work type thing. So that's the difficult part, right? Is getting started. But to give you an idea on this property, I did a 3% down conventional loan. So who's really good at math? How much money did I put down on this property? 3% of 115. $4,000, $3,250, right? So we'll just round up though. $4,000 down on a property. If you have a full-time job or you work over a summer, how many of you can scrounge up $6-7 to be able to go and put a down payment on a house, right? This definitely helped a lot that home prices were less than where they are today and rates were in a decent spot. My rate on that house was 5%, right? Which is right in the middle of where the lowest were 3%. Now we're up at 7%, a 5% down with PMI because I did less than 20% down, but I was able to secure the property. What I would recommend though is buy assets, don't buy liabilities. And so if you can't buy a house right now, there's actually ways for you to still get upside through different platforms in fintech. So an example of this is Lofty.ai, which allows you to buy tokenized real estate in the Midwest. And they offer anywhere between 4% cash on cash to 11% cash on cash returns. Yeah.
Getting into BREX as early as you did you have any opportunities for co-invest or a stock buy-in or anything like that?
Yeah. So this is something that BREX said was really cool. Not a lot of companies do it this way. In fact, I don't know any other company that does it this way. In tech, there's always a stock grant pool, right? And so With how the stock grants work, it usually vests over 48 months, so 4 years, with a 1-year cliff, which means that if you leave before that 1-year mark, then you would lose anything that was accruing or vesting over that first year. And when I started, they gave me the option of taking a higher cash pay with less stock or a lower cash pay with more stock. And I chose less cash for more stock. Right? And so, and they do that every time you get a raise, they do that. Something really cool that BREX does is every 6 months, as long as you're at least meeting expectations, you get a 2.5% raise no matter what. 5% a year guaranteed, and it can be upwards of even higher than that. It can be closer to 10% a year guaranteed. Okay? And you can choose all of that in stock if you want. You can choose all cash if you want, completely up to you. But yeah, getting in early at a startup, that is where all of the upside comes from. If you go to a traditional, already established company, you might get stock, but the actual upside of that probably isn't all that much, right? If you go to Facebook right now, it's actually at all-time lows right now. Might be a good time to go to Facebook, but you only are maybe gonna 20% return on your funds or whatever that might look like. Yeah. There's always room for negotiating, which going back to sales, right? Negotiating on pay. Being able to do that at the right times is also important. I would rather though be at the right company with a lower pay than the wrong company at a higher pay. I get job offers all the time that are higher paying, but I would hate working for that company. And so it's not worth it.
What's next in fintech? What do you think?
Yeah.
What's coming down the road?
So here's a good website for you guys to go to. If you're looking for, if you want to get into the startup world, ycombinator.com/companies. Y Combinator is my #1 partner. They're the lead investor in BREX. They invest in anywhere between 600 and 800 companies a year. And you can actually look at the specific fintech companies in there. But what is the future? What am I seeing? So financial technology, this space that BREX is in, which is corporate credit cards and spend management, is blowing up right now. There's lots of companies coming in. We're seeing a lot of Web3 companies. Even though you guys all think crypto's dead, there's a lot of Web3 companies still coming in, innovating and changing. MasterCard is investing a lot into the crypto space. I think Web3 is going to be huge, personally.
How would you define, like, I mean, you hear different definitions of Web3 from your vantage point. How would you define Web3?
Yeah, I mean, you think about like the way that money moves. So an example of this, has anyone ever sent an international wire before? What about a domestic wire? Okay, perfect. What was the experience for sending a domestic wire? Did you do it online? Did you have to go into a bank? Okay. Cool. So there's a lot of like anti-money laundering stuff, which, you know, in finance, you deal with this. AML, you have to deal with fraud, you have to deal with all of these different regulations there. Crypto, there's a lot of innovation where, you know, sending an international wire might take a week, but with crypto, it's there in 10 seconds. You send on this side, converts into crypto, goes across the blockchain, it's in the other account, fully converted, good to go 10 seconds later, right? Like that type of change is crazy that I see coming up the pipeline with a lot of these companies. The AML on that, as you can imagine, is going to be pretty wild. But I would say in fintech in general, right? Like the way that money moves, the way that money acts, investing is becoming easier than ever. Robinhood really changed the game here. How many of you use Robinhood? Probably, yeah, half the class. Great way for stock investing, right? It became free, it became easy, it became accessible. And that's what fintech is all about around money. And in my eyes, one of the most recession-proof types of companies. Klarna, how many of you know what Klarna is? So BNPL, buy now, pay later. So if you, every time you check out on Amazon now, there's a little option that says, do you want to pay this $200 over the next 6 months with 5% interest? Right. It's like that's becoming super popular, but Klarna just got crushed because a lot of individuals and companies were not paying back on that. But there's a lot going on in the BNPL space right now as well, to answer that question.
Any final questions?
So, I assume that fintech is like a hugely growing industry. Do you feel like that the same opportunities for growth that you've experienced through your career and things like that still exist in fintech, or do you think it'll be greater, or do you think those opportunities for growth will go down in the future?
Yeah, I think tech and fintech in general, there is an unbelievable amount of growth that we're still seeing. And so really, really cool companies. Revenue-based financing is really popular right now as well for companies, where typically you'd have to raise equity, sell part of your company in order to raise that capital to continue to grow. But now if you have solid revenues, you can just do revenue-based financing at a set interest rate, right? And like those types of companies, there's lots of opportunity for finance people to come in, work on that underwriting team, work on that KYC team. Okay. One thing I'll kind of add here at the end. So we have an operational rotational program at BREX for finance students. We've hired 4 or 5 Aggies so far. And if that is something that you're interested in coming in and doing, you basically work on the KYC team, the fraud team, the collections team, everything across that operational side of the house. And if you're well liked and you like it, then it's a great way to get a full-time offer from BREX. And you get to experience that side of the house.
Where does that happen with that application process, or what's that?
Yeah, so brex.com/jobs, it'll be one of the options on there under the operations team. And then within BREX, we make it very known that you can move across departments. So if you have like an end goal of making it to the finance team and you're on operations, you can do that. And you work with your manager on timeline of actually building out and understanding and filling out what you want to do. So BREX is awesome at that. Yeah.
Is that more like an internship or more of like a part-time job?
It's more of a full-time job that you work within BREX in each department for 6 months to a year. And then you get placed full-time into a specific position that you like best and that they like you in best.
What was the website you said?
brex.com/jobs. And then once again, if you want to work at one of the best startups, ycombinator.com/companies, that's all of the companies that have ever gone through YC. There's a little button at the top that will show what jobs are open. And so it's easy to apply for those as well. All right. Fun little class.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much. We'll round of applause. Well, listen, we really appreciate it. A different view, right? Startups, it's a different lifestyle, right? That the tech startup, the tech route, it's not traditional banking, it's not traditional finance necessarily, and there's opportunities in every direction you look once you kind of get in there. But like I think he said, you got to make your own opportunity. You got to figure it out on your own. You got to figure out what you want. So that's part of why you should hear this class, try to figure some of that stuff out. So thanks again, Jimmy. That was fantastic.
Absolutely.